Our next guest tracks daily short-selling data, and he says that investors could turn bearish on rail stocks in the months ahead. We're joined by Duff Gordon. He's a senior researcher at Data Explorers. Will, thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, we hope to do this more regularly, so just give us a little bit of a clue. Exactly how much can we read into these short-selling trends?
Well, short sellers can be right, they can be wrong, but the sort of research shows that over time they do tend to predict companies or sectors that are going to underperform, and it kind of pays to sort of check what they're doing. They pick up certain themes. So, for instance, pre-credit crunch, they were sort of not believing that the housing market could go higher and that this subprime thing was sustainable. There were some very famous examples of certain short sellers who were sort of began to be voices in the wilderness, whether it was on Lehman or whether it was on Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, in 2007, as early as that. More recently, somebody like Tim Steer at Artemis made a lot of money because he saw that a company like Connaught wasn't going to do very well as a result of the budget deficit cuts.
Well, how much money does this actually represent in terms of short selling? Just to give an idea, because it's just another way of looking at the markets.
It's another way of looking at the markets, and it's a non-conventional way of looking at the markets, I grant you. Yeah, there's about sort of $2 trillion worth of bonds and equities borrowed at the moment, and maybe a subset of that is for directional short selling. You've got to remember, a lot of short selling is for arbitrages and in hedging purposes. Not all of it is predicting that shares are going to go down. That tends to be what everybody thinks a short seller's always up to, but it's not always the case. Sometimes it's just hedging their portfolio. Now,
Will, one of the trends that you've actually looked at is rail stocks in Europe, and these are being short sold. Are you expecting them to be short sold?
Well, there's some are, some aren't. Stagecoach is the one that's had some boardroom changes. There's some potential short sellers are shorting about 6% of Stagecoach's shares, so it's not a vast amount, but that's probably treble the market average right now. They're covering shorts in Eurotunnel to an all-time low. They're expecting that company to zoom ahead. And there's a little bit of an increase in Siemens. Obviously, it's a very diversified company, but it does make trains, and it's just won the contract to make the next fleet for Eurotunnel rather than Alstom. So there's a bit of short interest in Siemens, which is interesting because there's never normally much short interest in these great German manufacturers.
Now, well, it's a very interesting. In your top 10 shorts, I found a couple of companies that I want to talk about. One is a U.S. chip maker, Microchip. Now, this is interesting because it's actually on the day where Intel and ASML beat estimates. What's going on there?
Well, what we try and do is filter for what the real investors out there are predicting to be the emerging short ideas, and Microchip has been in there for a couple of weeks now. So perhaps they're thinking that Intel is going to be taking more and more of a market share, and there maybe not be room for so many people in that market. Advanced Micro Devices has been in there. That's not in there right now. So perhaps people are going into Intel and AMD and maybe out of Microchip.
Muller-Maersk, now this is a huge company that actually brings things backwards and forwards, so this is about trade and exports. We're seeing these amazing China figures. I mean, what's going on there?
Well, that screen that we run is not the biggest shorts by any means. I think the short interest is very low, but what we tend to pick up is try and be early detectors rather than jumping on the bandwagon when something is very heavily shorted and potentially liable to a short squeeze. Something like Muller-Maersk, we might have just seen short interest just ticking up from a very, very low base in that. But yeah, it's not a heavy short at all.
And so it's not really a trend that we should be alarmed by.
Exactly, correct, exactly.
What about UK gaming companies? This is also, you have a couple of companies in there.
Yeah, well, Party Gaming is in there probably to do with its the deal it's doing with Bet and Win. Not strictly a gaming company, but has a gaming segment, is Ladbrokes, and that's quite a kind of significant and long-term short in the UK. Also, William Hill's is quite shorted as well, given that they are maybe they've got a big estate of betting shops they've got to look after, and things are going more online, and horse racing popularity is dwindling a little bit. So Ladbrokes is quite an interesting short, and there have been some high-profile fund managers like BlackRock announced a big short in it a few months ago.
Will, thank you so much. Great to have you on the show. Duff Gordon there.